Hello, and welcome to the Learn JavaScript series. In this video, we're going to discuss the basics of JavaScript objects. Let's get started. Objects in JavaScript are basically the same as objects in real life. They represent a collection of properties that each have a name and a value. If you think of any object in the real world, you'll be able to think of examples of properties that object has. A great example of a real-life object that can be modeled is a car. Cars have many properties like make, model, year, color, miles driven, and much more. When thinking about properties of an object, it makes sense to think about it like the property is a variable attached to the object, and that property has a name and a value. For a car, the color property would have a string value like red or blue. There are many ways to make an object in JavaScript, but the object literal syntax is the method which I am going to use in this video. It is a very popular way to initialize objects. In another video, I will discuss classes and inheritance, which is another way to model real-life objects as a hierarchical structure. But for this video, I'm going to stick with the basics of objects to give you a starting foundation. To make a new car object, I'll first make a new variable called car. The curly braces are used to denote that this is an object, and each property is a name and value pair separated by commas. This car has 4 properties: the make, the model, the color, and the year. To access a property on our new object, we can refer to the car variable and the property name that we want to access using dot notation. Attempting to access properties on the object that do not exist will return undefined. Properties of an object can also be accessed using bracket notation and referencing the property name as a string. This is particularly useful if you have an object property name saved as a string variable and want to use it to access the object's property value. It is possible to check if an object contains a specific property using a built-in object method called hasOwnProperty. This method takes a string that represents the property name that you want to check for existence, and it returns true or false depending on whether or not the property exists. Other useful built-in object methods are the object.keys and object.values. The keys method will return an array containing all of the object's enumerable property names, and the values method will return all of the object's property values. This is useful when chained with other JavaScript functional programming concepts to iterate over objects with access to the property names and values in order to perform some action on the object or to create a list of the object's contents. Objects are a cornerstone of JavaScript, and as such, they have many intricacies and usage patterns. This episode aimed to be a small introduction to the world of JavaScript objects, but there is still much more to learn about this incredibly important concept. In another video, I will discuss classes and inheritance in JavaScript, which will explore the topic of objects in a more in-depth fashion. I'll also discuss objects in a video on object best practices and the best way to use objects to make your code more readable. That wraps up this introduction to JavaScript objects. As always, the description of this video will contain a link to a code sandbox that contains all of the code that I've written. Feel free to take a look at that and play around with it. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, and I hope you have a great day.